Hello. In this tutorial, I will be going over how to dynamically display an entire path on your activity diagram using Groovy scripting. So here in this example, you can see I have a few things highlighted on this diagram. On the left in green, we have a comment that says show upstream path of this activity node. Now by upstream, I essentially mean any incoming edges to that action. So you can see the comment is anchored to action 7. Incoming to that, we have action 6, and then from there we could follow the incoming path to action 2, then from there to the fork node, then to action 1, and then to the activity initial node. On the right side, you see in blue, we have a very similar structure set up here, only the comment here says show downstream path. So starting with action 4, we are looking at all of the outgoing activity edges and then following that path all the way down to our activity final node. So the way I chose to implement this is actually by using comments to select what actually gets adorned on the diagram. So this dynamic legend, which you see in the upper right-hand corner, has two legend items, one for downstream, one for upstream. That's the blue and green that you're seeing here respectively. And those legend items are actually looking for the word downstream in the comment. So when it sees that word downstream, it knows to adorn the comment, the anchored item on the activity diagram, and all downstream activity nodes and edges coming from that item. And the way that we pick the downstream and upstream activity nodes and edges on the diagram is by defining a custom opaque behavior. So you can see in the containment tree on the left, we have two opaque behaviors defined, one for downstream and one for upstream. And each of those have a parameter, which I simply named A, and is typed by an activity node. So the activity node, which can be an action, merge, a decision, any like node on the diagram will serve as our starting point. If we look inside this opaque behavior, inside the body and language window, you can see this is where that Groovy script comes in. And I will leave this script in the comments so that you can copy and paste it and feel free to play with this in your own model. So you can see the script, I have comments showing what each line is doing from line 1 all the way down to line 54. Rather than go through this line by line in the code, I have a separate diagram which I will show kind of going over the logic of that script. Right, so in this activity diagram, just kind of giving a more of a visual representation of what the script is actually doing. So the way the script starts is it creates an empty array, which I named Y, just to store our target nodes, which we will collect by running the target and loop functions, which I'll get to in a moment. We also define an empty array W, which will collect all of our outgoing paths. Then we define our target function. So what the target function does is it takes your activity node input and through a few decision nodes and actions, it will output the target nodes. So any outgoing paths coming from your input activity node, it will follow those paths and give you the activity nodes to which they lead, so your targets. From there, what we do is we define a variable j equals 0, and essentially what j is it's going to be just an integer that we increase by 1 each time we loop through that target function. And we will loop through the target function recursively to find the targets of our targets, essentially. So starting with our initial node, we want to get the targets are things that that node leads to. And then we want to take those and run that target function again so that we follow that path all the way down to the very last element in that chain. So that's what this loop function is doing. From there, we collect our W and Y arrays, which, as you recall, are all of our target nodes and outgoing paths. We combine those lists, and then we remove duplicates. So if there are any loops in your activity chain, this step will remove any duplicate values so that your output is a simple flat list of all of your outgoing edges and nodes. So going back to our example, if we look at the legend item itself and go down to our elements by condition. So as I mentioned, the legend item works by looking at the comment itself, and we're actually adorning three things here. So the first thing we have is the comment itself. As you can see, the comment has that blue border around it, and that's because what we're doing is looking for any comment that has the word downstream and adorning that. We are also taking that same comment and looking for its annotated element. So that would be action 4 in this example. Since that is anchored to the comment, we are going to highlight that as well. And then the third thing would be where that downstream opaque behavior comes in. So you can see we are taking that anchored element and defining that as an input to our map flat function. And then the operation which we are running is that downstream function, which is going to output all of the downstream elements from that activity node. So that's how you set up the legend. And as long as you have your opaque behaviors defined with that code shared in the description below, then you should be able to display activity paths just as you see in this example. If you have any comments or questions on this, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Additionally, I would like to mention that we do offer training classes in how to build complex structured expressions, which includes Groovy scripting as you've seen in this example here. In this training, we go over several topics such as how to define custom columns, derived properties, dynamic legends, opaque behaviors, and many of the operations that are used to develop these complex structured expressions, as well as user-defined operations, scripting, and embedded scripts within structured expressions. The training also includes a sample model with several examples, such as the one shown here today. So please reach out if you have any questions, comments, or would like to learn more about building structured expressions or Groovy scripting in MagicDraw. Thank you.